By wishing everyone a happy Black History Month. And I'm very proud that our administration represents all of Washington, D.C., where more than 57% of my cabinet members are African American. And we know that reflects our city. I am proud that people regard D.C. government as a great place to work and to grow their careers. So today I'm announcing transitions in leadership at 3 agencies. The first being the Office of let me say the 3, the Office of Unified Communications, Victim Services and Justice Grants, and the Department of Aging and Community Living. I want to start by thanking Jessica Smith, who is a valued member of our team, for serving as interim director at DACL. Which is the Department of Aging and Community Living that we now affectionately call DACL, and Cheryl Bowser for serving as interim director at OVSJG that does incredibly important work with victim services in our justice grant space. And I have spoken at length about how much I appreciate and admire Karima Holmes for her expertise and leadership at the Office of Unified Communications, and I know that is a sentiment shared by our OUC team. So now I would like to announce our new members. First, Sharon Hines, I am appointing as the, you may applause. I am very proud to appoint Sharon as the acting director of the Department of Aging and Community Living. Director Hines has over 2 decades of experience working with the community as a teacher and a principal and here in DC government. She currently serves as the senior advisor to the chancellor at DC Public Schools, and she has previously served in my cabinet as the director of community affairs. She will transition from supporting our youngest residents at DCPS to our more seasoned residents at the Department of Aging and Community Living. So congratulations, Sharon. I now want to acknowledge my appointment of Heather McGaffin. Heather is being appointed as the acting director of the Office of Unified Communications. Director McGaffin began her public safety career at the age of 16 when she became a volunteer EMT with her local fire department. In 2005, Director McGaffin joined the Calvert Control Center in Calvert County, Maryland as a 911 call taker. She worked through the ranks as a dispatcher, shift supervisor, trainer, manager, and eventually deputy director. From 2015 to 2020, she served as a consultant for a national public safety firm where she supported emergency operations centers, localities, and state governments in restructuring, training, and next-gen 911 implementation. Director McGaffin joined OUC in October 2020 as the Chief of Special Operations and Executive and Investigations and became Deputy Director in February 2022. Let's appreciate and congratulate Ms. McGaffin. I next want to acknowledge Jennifer Porter. Jennifer Porter is being appointed as the Director of the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants. Director Porter currently leads the Mayor's Office on Women's Policy and Initiatives, a role where she serves as the Chief Advocate for women and girls in D.C. Now at OVSJG, she will support and advocate for victims in D.C. as well as their families and communities, and advance the cause of justice in our city. Please join me in congratulating and welcoming all 3 directors. And I'm now very pleased to answer any questions that you may have. From the press first, please. Press questions. Yes, sir.
Mayor Bowser, thanks. You said you would launch a nationwide search for the new OUC director. Can you talk about your thought process in looking elsewhere and hiring internally?
We have had a vacancy open for the Office of Unified Communications for several months, and we have conducted our interviews, and I'm very confident that we have a great leader in Heather to lead our agency.
Will Ms. Holmes be staying at the agency in a different capacity?
I think Ms. Holmes is going to have an outside opportunity. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Bowser, there were complaints about how OUC was handling certain calls that included a death. How do you feel that this helps build the trust when the person you're now nominating for this position is coming from within and not someone outside?
As I said, I've had an opportunity to talk to people who are inside the agency, outside the agency, and people who have questions about the agency. And what they want is a person who knows 911 from the inside and out, from dispatching calls to training staff to supporting staff, and even if it's necessary to disciplining staff. And that is the leader we have in Heather.
Can we please ask?
Sure.
Hi, good morning.
Same question, how you hope to build that trust when there were criticisms that, this was a culture that was continued within the department.
Sure. So I've worked in 911 since I was 22 years old is when I took my first 911 call. I remember that call. I remember the thousands after that call. I have had the ability to work in multiple centers across this nation, both internally and as a support in helping to restructure. I've worked here at OUC through 2 administrations, and we have work to do, and we're going to do that work, and we are going to be strong in the work that we do and remain transparent and accountable in that work.
Sure.
When you talk about holding accountable, and that has been some of the criticism, particularly toward the union there, how will you address that? I mean, what does accountability look like for a 911 call taker who has made repeated mistakes?
Sure. So I think first that starts with a conversation. Accountability looks different. So we have to decide what accountability means to us, to the public, to the residents, to to everyone within the city. And so we're going to start there, and then we're going to build from that. And we are going to remain transparent. We're going to be providing things online. You can find those things now. We're going to be expanding that, and we're going to put together a comprehensive plan that we're going to share out over the next couple of months.
Will you put the CAD report online?
We have to go through certain legal things with the CAD reports. Just because we have the CAD reports doesn't mean we can share those out. We have to look to our general counsel and to the legal rulings within the city to make sure that we can put out the information that we have. Thank you.
And Mayor Bowser,
Yep.
can I follow with you? Just kind of housekeeping on all 3 of these. These will all be your nominees
Correct.
for the positions. Do these all require residency, or there's a residency requirement for all 3 of these?
Yes.
Do all 3 of them currently meet that requirement?
All 3 of them will meet the requirement within 180 days, as the law requires.
Who does not currently meet the requirement?
Ms. McGaffney is not a DC resident.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you talk about how many candidates were in the lineup before today's decision?
I don't typically talk about our interview process for the privacy concerns of people who participate in it.
And then, Ms. McGaffin, just another question for you. Can you tell us, is there just one thing that you want to address right away in your new position?
Sure. We want to look at everything holistically. I don't think I can stand here today and say this is the one thing. We're going to look at everything holistically, and when we have our priorities, we will make those known.
Are there questions? Yes.
Off-topic question.
Okay.
So Council Chair Mendelson put out a statement this morning condemning House Republicans for introducing 2 disapproval resolutions over DC laws that are before them, the Revised Criminal Code Act, and then another that will allow non-citizens to vote. What's your stance on those resolutions, and does your administration plan to do any type of lobbying to prevent congressional interference in DC's affairs?
Well, I have addressed previously my concerns with the criminal code revision, and my intent to work with the council to change it and to address those concerns. And I continue to think that's the way to handle it, that we will deal with it locally. I'm talking to the council members about what I think those changes should be, and I'm hoping that they're going to stand with me in advancing those recommendations through the legislative process.
But what about the interference on the Hill?
The Hill should never interfere with what we do, but we also have to address the very serious concerns that not just I have, but people have about what this crime bill does.
So what's your stance on the disapproval resolutions before?
My stance is we have to change the criminal code revision bill. I'm going to have some suggestions for the council, and I'm hoping that they're going to stand with me on that so we can credibly say that we're addressing the concerns.
Mayor,
Yes, yes.
so Mayor,
Hold on,
just to
sorry.
stay- If I can just stay on this topic.
Yep.
I mean, do you want to call out the, Comer here or Andy Clyde who's pushing these interference, resolutions, essentially?
I've really said all I'm going to say about it. We need to make some changes, and we need to handle them locally. And that's what we need to, and that's what I would say, whether it was crime or whether it is the immigration bill, where there's the marijuana riders or the intrusion on women's reproductive health in the District of Columbia. We don't want any interference on our local laws. But I also know that there's a lot of concern in our city, and if people want to put their head in the sand about this, I think it would be unwise. That we have to address this crime bill, and we need to do it urgently.
What's your stance on the non-citizen voting bill?
I believe I signed that bill. Any other questions?
Well, can we follow up on that? Because just along those same lines, if Congress, the disapproval resolution wouldn't get through the Senate likely, but they could put riders on the bill that would, for instance, not allow you to fund the immigration voting bill, or maybe even possibly parts of the crime bill. How do you combat that, or how are you preparing?
Mark, we're in a new world, okay? And we all need to recognize that we're in a new world, that we may have an activist Congress. We may have a Congress that's hostile to Washington, D.C. in particular. We may have a Congress that's hostile to cities. And we're entering upon an election cycle for the President of the United States. So yes, we are in a new environment. My approach to working with the Congress, I have talked about before. No matter who's in power, Democrats or Republicans in the Congress, or Democrats and Republicans in the White House, in the district, we have to be able to work with them, and we have to tell them what our values are and that we're going to stand by our values. Now, our legislative process is what it is. The council passes laws. I either sign them or I don't, and they go to the Congress. That is part of the process. And so we have to deal with this portion of it until we're a state and we're no longer subjected to it. Yep. Next question.
My question is still on in this area, but so are you saying that somehow you might be able to change this?
I'm saying I must change it. In my view, we must change the law. And I've heard at least one council member say that she is willing to look at amendments. She's the chair of the committee. I've talked to her. I told her that we would have some language for her to look at, likely today. And I want that introduced at the council, and her commitment that she's going to hold a hearing and move it through the council.
So that this would happen before they had a chance to vote on the Hill.
I'm expecting to be able to announce a piece of legislation before the Congress votes.
Now, Mayor, if this were something that you, let's say, supported, what would your reaction be?
Say again?
I said, if this were something that you support, obviously you don't support what the council passed in terms of the crime bill, but if this were something that, to say you supported, what would your reaction be?
To the crime bill?
If
I don't
you
follow
and the
your
council
question.
were on the same page,
Yep.
what would your reaction be?
The council and I are on the same page for the most part on the immigration bill. The issue is the same. So I don't support the Congress interfering in the affairs of the district. But I also know that we have to address this crime bill. And I expect and I hope that the council will stand with us and say these are practical changes that have been weighed in on by the U.S. Attorney, and the courts in the District of Columbia have expressed similar concerns. And quite frankly, members of Congress have expressed similar concerns. I just got to be frank with you. There's a lot of people that don't agree with what the council did. They're happy that I spoke up against it. They're outraged that the council passed the veto and is not paying attention to what's happening in our city. I shouldn't say that. That's unfair. Everybody is paying attention, but people don't agree with the approach.
Also, just kind of changing subject a little bit, it seems that you and the Republican members are on the same side on this whole issue of federal workers going back to work for your own particular reasons. Is that
for my own particular reasons?
No. I'm saying not for your own particular reasons. Yes, you and members of Congress, they have their own reasons. You have your reasons. You want more economic activity in downtown D.C.
No, I want vibrancy in the nation's capital and American productivity. And that also means that we will have a great American downtown that is vibrant and productive, and everyone should want that.
And you want these workers back on the job, in offices?
Sam, I don't know how else to tell you. I had a big speech where I talked about it. I have an economic revitalization strategy that I also released. And our view is not that we're going to go back to 2019. Nobody thinks that. But it is also my view that most federal workers should be in the office most of the time. At least we should have a centralized strategy. At least if you call up anybody that is responsible for personnel management, they should know what the policy is from agency to agency. And I just don't think that we have that now.
Mayor, just going back for a second. So, I mean, have you met with the House GOP Oversight Chair, Comer?
I haven't.
What about the Speaker, McCarthy?
I haven't, but I expect to.
Do you have something planned, or have you made an outreach yet?
I have.
Do you know when?
I don't have anything planned, and we haven't attempted to schedule it yet.
How important would that meeting be for you?
I would regard it as a courtesy and an introductory meeting, and then we'll decide as we approach it what are the priorities we want to discuss. But it would be no different. Well, it might be somewhat different than the meetings that we've had with other speakers. I've met with Boehner, for example, when he was the speaker. I don't remember if we met with Ryan, but we've had conversations with leadership throughout our tenure.
Do you think there are areas for collaboration?
I don't know yet. I'll see. I think this leadership, we don't know how they're going to operate. Already the first few weeks have been, they've been focused on their own organization. And so I expect to talk about our priorities, and I'll know better when we get closer to that time.
Do you support Comer's bill about federal workers back off?
We have taken no position on that bill. It is our position to work with the administration. We see, just like we have in D.C. government, that I, as the mayor and the chief executive officer, am responsible for our workplaces and how people come to work and making sure that we're staffed and productive. And I think that is also the president's responsibility.
Could I ask, you say most employees, most days of the week. What does that exactly mean? I mean, aren't they back 3 days a week?
No, they are not.
And how much? Do you have a census on how many employees are back, or how many?
I do not, but I challenge you to walk into any federal workplace and tell me how many people you think are back.
What's DC government's posture?
We have employees that are 100% in person every day, and they've never been off for COVID. Like our DPW workers, like our police officers, like our teachers. Who else am I missing? DPR staff. A lot of people that report full-time and have never been off. And then we have people who do office work who are allowed up to 2 days of telework in some cases if it's approved.
Do you know how many are essentially not back in the office most days of the week then?
They would all be in the office most days of the week because they're only allowed up to 2 days of telework.
Basically, I mean, DC is not fully back into the office, but you want the federal government to do that.
Oh, I didn't say that the federal government had to be back 5 days a week. That wasn't what I said. Listen closely.
Sure.
Most employees, most of the time.
That's what the federal government says. They say we're back 3 days a week.
That's not true. And I challenge you to find out if that's true.
Well, it's not, but I mean, the fact remains DC's not fully back.
Listen, you're confusing things. I'm telling you what our policy is. That is not the federal government's policy to have people report to the office 3 days a week. That is not their policy.
Do you know their policy?
Yes, I do. Their telework policy suggests that if you come in once per pay period, in some agencies, that's enough. Some agencies are 100% remote. This is my point, and I hope you get it clear, that it's not like a central policy. It is agencies decide what their policy is, I think.
I mean, there are independent agencies in DC. You can't control them, I guess. I mean, they're independent, quasi-independent, that aren't back 3 days a week. Right?
Well, they should be.
Do you think the DC Council should be back?
I do. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Mayor. Nick Ian, LAWTOP News. After the shooting of a member of the Safe Passage program, we were just wondering if you could elaborate on your stance on the program, the city's stance on the program.
We think it's a very important program to our overall public safety apparatus. We're at over 50 locations throughout the District of Columbia to support schools. It's especially important given that our police personnel, our numbers aren't where they should be, especially after 2 years of non-hiring. So it's very important. It's a very important program. We place a high emphasis on making sure the contractors that work with us have trusted and vetted personnel, and that is where we're putting our attention.
Do we know what that person was doing at the time of the shooting? I think he was off duty, but he was wearing a vest that said Safe Passage.
We think he was preparing for his duty station.
Do we know where he was stationed?
I'm sorry?
Where he was stationed? Do we know that?
Nearby.
Nearby.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
We now return to our previously scheduled program, already in progress.